Hey, what's up, classes? Mr. Hayes here. This video is all about proper attribution, how to give credit where credit is due, and weave into your main article, your anchor article, the different sources that you compiled in your source slideshow and give credit to those authors. When you're compiling information from other sources, you must properly attribute those sources in your own writing. That's Journalism Ethics 101. So we're going to talk about some different ways to do that today, some keys to remember as you're doing it, and also give you some sentence stems that will help you do this properly. So really there's two ways to attribute sources. You can see them right here on my screen. There's attribution through paraphrasing and attribution through a direct quote. The first one is paraphrasing. Some of you may know that paraphrasing means to restate something in your own words. Well, you can do this with the information you got from one of your sources as well. You can see here in my example of paraphrasing, there are no quotation marks. Instead, I've taken the information from this source of Smithsonian Magazine and I've rewritten it in my own words. But I wouldn't have known this info without this source. I got it from this source. So I want to make sure I give it the proper credit. So here is a way that you can write a paraphrased sentence attributing to a source. According to Kat Eschner of Smithsonian Magazine, during the War of the Currents, Edison supporters, desperate to show that alternating current was much more dangerous than direct current, had electrocuted a number of animals, dogs, calves, even a horse. So what I did here is I used this sentence stem, according to, which is the most popular one to use when paraphrasing. According to Kat Eschner, the name of the author of the publication Smithsonian Magazine, comma, and then I restated the info from that article that I got and put on my source slideshow. I restated it in my own words. You can also do the according to at the end as well. It can go at the beginning or the end, as long as that phrase here, that attribution phrase, that sentence stem is included somewhere when you are attributing using the strategy of paraphrasing. So that's one example. Example two is even easier. That's a direct quote. That's where you don't want to go through the business of paraphrasing. Instead, you just want to take a very powerful quote from a source and include it word for word in your own article. So here's the way to do that. You can see there's quotation marks in this one. Quote, Topsy had in fact killed a man, but her execution was ordered only later, after she proved unmanageable at the hands of a trainer who savaged her with a pitchfork. Yikes. Unquote, writes Vicky Constantine Croak in an review of Daly's book for the New York Times. Then I finish with my own sentence that I simply wrote to add to the quote that supplements it well. Topsy's complicated and often cruel relationship with her handlers would continue right up until her death. So here, I took a direct quote from this source, the New York Times review, with my author. I included the quote word for word with quotation marks surrounding it. And I have this sentence stem, writes, author's name, Vicky Constantine Croak, where? In a review of Daly's book for the New York Times. That's an attribution through a direct quote. And then I added my own sentence and my own words completely that simply complements that quote that adds to it. So either strategy is good to use, paraphrasing or direct quote. The most important thing is to achieve a balance between the two. You don't want to do all paraphrasing. You don't want to do all direct quotes. Why? Well, if you simply just paraphrase everything and have no direct quotes, you're not going to seem very credible to the reader. You want to make sure you are weaving in people who have a ton of expertise on this topic and referencing them. It doesn't seem like you've put in the work necessarily. So direct quotes are really great to use with paraphrasing. Opposite, it works the same way. If you do all direct quotes and no paraphrasing, it's going to seem like you barely wrote the thing at all, like you just copied and pasted stuff from different sources. And that's going to hurt your credibility too. So you want to find a good mix between paraphrasing and direct quotes and use both within your article. Some things to remember when using attribution. Number one, you don't have to attribute anything that is common knowledge. So what I mean by that is if you are writing about killer whales and you state that killer whales live in the ocean or live in water, that's something people know about whales. So you don't have to quote that. You don't have to attribute that. You can simply type out that sentence without giving it attribution. Anything that's common knowledge that generally most people know. I know that's subjective, but you don't have to necessarily attribute that. Second thing, anytime you use quotation marks, credit must be given. You can't just have a quote hanging out there with no attribution. You must use attribution, direct quote, you must use this type of writing with a phrase that gives credit to the author and gives credit to the source anytime you have a direct quote. You can't just have that quote hanging out there with nothing attached to it. Third, you want to mix a paraphrasing and direct quotes in your article. I talked about that before. 4, if you are paraphrasing, you only have to give credit to the source once per paragraph. Otherwise, your writing will sound awkward. What I mean by that is if you are writing a paragraph with a lot of attribution through paraphrasing, and your first sentence starts with according to, second sentence according to, third sentence ends with according to, fourth sentence according to. If you do that every single sentence, your writing is going to sound really awkward. Generally, you only have to credit something once per paragraph if you're paraphrasing. That covers the whole paragraph. That'll keep you out of plagiarism jail. You only have to do that according to paraphrasing sentence stem once per paragraph. You don't have to do it every single sentence. Even though you got that information from that source, you really only have to do it once per paragraph. That covers the entirety of the paragraph. And then finally, your works cited, which you will do next week, will serve as giving credit to your sources as well. So it's not just attributing within your article, but the works cited will help. So some sentence stems. I'm going to move this all down to the bottom here. There are some ways that you can properly attribute sources. And I gave you 5 different possibilities for how to use both the name of the source and the author in a way that gives credit to that source, and your writing will flow, it'll sound natural, and it's grammatically correct. So here are 5 options. One is the one I've mentioned many times before with paraphrasing, according to. According to, then you have the name of the source, the author, or both. So my example here, according to Zach Hayes of the New York Times, of course I made this up, Thomas Edison ordered his film company to capture Topsy's death. Okay, that's one option. Or you can go right away with the name of the author and say also writes that. So Zach Hayes also writes that, quote, Thomas Edison ordered his film company to capture Topsy's death. Here I use a direct quote from the quotation marks. This is right from that article. And since I used also for this one, you're only going to want to use this sentence stem when you've already referenced that source once or already referenced that author once before, hence the also. Or you can do, this should be in parentheses, name of the source states that. So if you don't have a specific author attached to a source, not every single source is going to have an author. Most should, but some might not. You can simply just say the New York Times states that and then use the direct quote. You can also do the name of the source, or the name of the author, I should say, a description of who he or she is to give them even more credibility, and then states that. So if you're doing a direct quote, you could do Zach Hayes, author of the book Topsy and Edison, states that, quote, Thomas Edison ordered his film company to capture Topsy's death. And I realize here I haven't done my proper italics for a source or a book title, so I'm going to add that. That's option 4. And option 5, you can start with the quote. Direct quote, writes blank in blank, writes name of the author and name of the source. So it'll sound like this. Thomas Edison ordered his film company to capture Topsy's death. Writes Zach Hayes, author of the book Topsy and Edison. I've got my direct quote, then the name of the author, and then where they write from. So any of these sentence stems would work. Figure out what works best for you. Make sure you're doing a mix of as many of these 5 as you can. So you add some sentence variety and different types of sentence structure to the reader so it doesn't sound super repetitive. But hopefully in this video, you now better understand how to attribute sources. Remember, you can use paraphrase and direct quote. I would recommend a blend of each. And based on what you're writing, based on whether you're using attribution through paraphrasing or direct quote, use these sentence stems, use these examples, use these templates to help you craft your sentences in your article. Any questions, give me a holler. I will be around. Hopefully this video helps you and can get you going to properly credit your sources like a good journalist should. Thanks, everybody.